this one prison in the South someplace.
That did the men in the prison? Yes, gosh, it was a great presentation. Okay, at least have this.
That's that.
Okay.
And you have to have, you have to have privilege to be able to look at these guys, and they don't even read, they just do them.
I know. And their designs.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, they came up with the most creative designs. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So, are we live yet? We are. Okay. Hi. Welcome to Liberated Quilting. So many apologies for skipping last week. I had a fall and had to have an MRI and get appointments with doctors and stuff. And that one doctor that you have to see was on the same day. So I'm really sorry to have to cancel, but I'm good. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah, little fracture in one of these, but it's so anyway, that hasn't stopped me from sewing. Yay. I guess I can take these off. I'm indoors. We have for those of you on the camera are not in Missoula, we're having such beautiful weather, but it's getting hot. I actually am overdressed. So today our topic is panels. And panels are love-hate kind of thing. So you'll see panels in the stores and they just draw you in, and you buy. This is only a small portion of the pile I have at home. And you buy them, or this is the thing that, like the ones I have in my stash, when friends close down their sewing habits, either out of whatever interest, I don't understand that one, but or they're aging to a point they're downsizing and don't have an option. Panels are the things people give you. So I have a number of them that are both my own purchases and also those that people have given me. And I've really enjoyed doing the Pinterest search on panels. And again, I'll just say, go to Pinterest, just search panels, quilts, and you will get a plethora of possibilities. And so, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm sorry I had a handout. No, I'm glad I had a handout. I'm sorry it didn't work at my home option. This person probably more to blame than the computer, but I couldn't get the printing mechanism and the sending mechanism to work smoothly. So, so I have that in my head, and I'll just go on that today. So let me just do a little show and tell here on panels, because they, like I said, can just draw us in. Isn't that just striking?
Yes.
I think that was here. I think I got that here, maybe. Yes? Okay, good. And I just, man, did it draw me in. In fact, now that you've confirmed it, I've allowed my brain to dig a little deeper in the Rolodex. And my husband was with me, I know, and we were looking for fabrics that would meet these colors. And he saw it and went, well, that's really beautiful. So when my husband says that's really beautiful, I go, I'll take 10 yards, thank you. No. But so this is, I just got one panel, and the intent actually had been to cut it up. But that's the problem with panels, is that there's this awareness of the possibilities for cutting it up, and there's this awareness of, yeah, but it looks so cute or pretty or whatever all on its own. So so this one is really still grabbing my heartstrings, and I'm still trying to decide what to do. But it's in the pile. and it's just too beautiful. I just love it. The other thing about panels is size. And, this is really long and narrow.
Right.
And so then you think, okay, so do I add a really wide border on the sides? Does it become a table runner? How do we do this? So that also is a problem. A lot of panels for children that I've collected, like I said, either I bought them or was given them. And I just think this one is so cute. And it's, it has the appearance of being a quilt that somebody, the design being appliqued or pieced. The stars certainly pieced. Lots of possible applique were it an actual quilt. But in a panel, one can pretty much just take it like this and go. And it certainly is a reasonable size for a baby quilt.
Yeah.
Then the question is quilting. And so, okay, well, gee, this is a really complex design. Do I try and outline everything? Do I whatever? I say don't. I say this was easy. Keep it easy. This was complicated, and were someone to have brought me this quilt all appliqued and pieced, I would probably use my recommendation for quilting, and that is go inexpensive, because the quilting for most people is not what they see first, and they certainly don't see at a drive-by. So it's the close-up examination. This is not the award-winning piece, so I'm not going to spend that kind of time for one. Were it all hand appliqued and all that, then the quilter and I would have to have a conversation about what is this going to go to. Is it going to be something in a show? Is it going to be something that goes to a baby? If it's going to go to a baby, I say all over quilting. It'll hold everything down very securely, stand up against lots of washings. And again, that's not what someone would see right off the bat. So this would probably get an all over quilting design from me and be quilted and bound and called a quilt. And so this is a nice, simple way to go. I'm going to keep this out because we'll have some discussion about, yeah, but those panels are printed on the weave that isn't necessarily all straight and lovely. So we'll have a little chat about that. This is one I have, in fact, cut out and used, but I just love the little pillow panels. They're so sweet. A lot of times a pillow panel will come with 4 square-ish pieces, and then they'll have some kind of border, something that you can utilize. If you're creative. And maybe you won't utilize it, I don't know. But if you think about these, they could be incorporated into an apron, and then this could be on the hem of the apron or something like that. So there's some ways to pull things in together. You could cut these individual pieces out, and I hope I'm going to be able to show you some pictures or direct your attention to some quilts that incorporate the large squares and smaller squares into a quilt design. So if you can envision these large squares being cut out and then make a log cabin in colors that go with this, and then you put these as the centers of your log cabins. So you've incorporated the smaller ones with the larger, and you alternate the picture block with the log cabin block. Or you put 3 on a diagonal or something, because I only have 3 now.
So if you did that, would you cut out the shape, or would you cut out?
I would cut out as a square.
Okay.
I would fussy cut so it's in the basic center.
Right.
And cut out a square, and then I would use it as that log cabin square center start. and then build around it. Okay. I'm also going to show a fun technique today that could also be used with something like this. So that's one. I just love the colors in it. It's so rich and warm, and yet still has kind of that. It almost goes to fall colors, but it still has the pretty pictures of flowers in springtime. So that's kind of fun. Here's another child's panel. Sometimes you can find like books and things like that. Sometimes you can think of things to incorporate with that piece that's on the outside of this. So we have hold it right side up here. We have a scene of the railroad track and the cat fishing and sheep grazing and the bear driving the car and so on. And so you have your little town panel, and then you have these squares on the outside that are sort of like a child's book of sorts. And those could be, again, you could use this as the center part of your quilt and then cut these, and they have enough background to give you the 1/4-inch seam to sew them in. Sometimes that's something to watch out for, that if you cut on the lines, you can run into some trouble with sewing it and cutting off your design. But these little things here, a duck, what does that say? Oh, it's in French or something. Or carro. It's in Spanish. Okay. Yeah. And lirios, it must, oh, lilies. That's what that is. I was looking at this one going, what word is that? Upside down and backwards? No, I'm still not making sense of it. It's Spanish. How fun. So this is an American Spanish or English and Spanish mix. And that could be put together so that, like I say, this is a big piece of the center of the quilt. And then you incorporate these. Perhaps these are squares that are center of a star, and put star points. So you have those blocks added in. There's a number of things that can be done. And I'll just remind people again, if you're local, our Quilts for Kids group that meets at Grace Methodist on Wednesdays, they have a lot of things like this, and really like it when somebody comes and has that creative oomph to go, I think I know what to do with that, and starts going to town. And some of our sewist quilters are really very, very creative in how they incorporate things like these little squares. And if you're out of Missoula, your own community may have a kids quilt charitable group that may like things like this turned into quilts. This one is so darn cute. It's alphabet, if I remember right. Am I right? Alphabet bugs or something, maybe. Yeah, or something. I mean, it's not alphabet, but anyway, it's got some fun little critters on it. And this, because they're rounded corners, puts a little assembly question in mind, because if you cut a 1/4-inch out, then you're going to leave that little piece, and that might be fine for your design. You'll have that little cut off corner, rounded off corner. But if you if your seam allowance is pretty, if you cut right in between there, it looks like to me like you'd have more than a 1/4-inch seam allowance. So you'd have this blue showing and you'd have the rounded corner. So then you'd have some, okay, well, maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. Maybe you'd cut right into the frame and reduce that size and make it square. So there's, panels just create some things that are it's almost like finishing a quilt someone started. So you kind of have somebody else's idea going and going, okay, now I have to figure out how to make that go further. So, so when you have the design where there's some rounded corner, it makes it tricky, or maybe it's scallopy or something like that in the printed design, you can choose to go beyond that. And so with the background showing, you can try to sew right on the edge of it and have the scallop or the rounded curve sort of fit into the square of the sewing. And you can cut smaller and just cut those off. Okay. So this could go right to that point and basically cut off about a 1/4 inch or so. And then it would just be a straight corner, a 90-degree angle. So, so there's a few ways to take something like this and go, okay, now it's not so hard to use. I think we can go from there. And these can be, you know, this would be a fun one where you maybe sash in black and go right up to these bright colors. And so you'd anchor that down, or perhaps a dark navy blue, so because the background of all these are blue, that's always a nice kind of dark denim sort of color. That can work. Sometimes you go wild. There's any number of possibilities. Okay. This one is I just get tempted all the time by this woman's work, and right off the top of my head, I'm forgetting her name. Yes, Laurel Birch. Thank you. And this, if I remember right, this was a panel that had like 4 or 6 different things in it. So the black separated these kinds of squares or rectangles. They were a variety of sizes, if I'm remembering right. And so this one's just could be a nice little wall hanging, or it could be the center of a quilt where quite a bit is added out beyond it. And the colors could prove to be a little tricky if you start working on a much bigger design around it, because what can happen is this really distinct sense of inside this design, there are these very specific dyes and color blends and things, and then you have these other fabrics that, yeah, they go with it, but because we're not truly mixing them in, then you have a border that's different. So sometimes it's trickier than you might think to have it all merged together nicely. This was an inherited piece. Makes me laugh. For all you hunters or wild bird people. Do I have it upside down? No. So these are all like ducks floating in the water, and just really boring colors. And you can see I have a large piece of it and I haven't used it, and it's been in my stash for a really long time. I did use 1 or 2. You can tell I cut one out. Yeah, 2, I guess I did, pillows or something for somebody who likes ducks. So anyway, so when we have something like this, gosh, the possibilities are endless. But one of the things that does work really well is adding those other fabrics in, because these are also muted, that it's pretty easy to pull those colors. And you have we've talked about this before. I think I saw a selvage. Oh, maybe that was on the other one. Sometimes there's a selvage, the bubbles that have the colors in it. And so you can use that if you want to go try and find other colors. But this would lend itself nicely to like an Irish chain setting. So you'd take these blocks and put them with the Irish chain, you know, going diagonally, and then they're square fitting right in that middle section. And so that would, you know, if you like ducks, you have a lot of them here, and you could make a nice big quilt. So there's that. So that's the, I have a couple others I'm going to demonstrate with, but these, so now I want to talk a little bit about squaring up. And I think we'll use this. So what you have to think about with panels is that when you buy fabric yardage, so even to just look, say we bought yardage that was all this, that design is swirled through, and it's not something you have to line up with the threads and or have it be, oh, you know, if I cut a border, it's totally crooked. So it's easy to just do your squaring up of your selvages, cut nice straight cuts of strips, and have it work for a border. And even if you have to seam it, if it's a bigger border, it lines up. It doesn't take a lot to try and line it up or anything. It works well. So, but when you have something where there are right angles and all that, they aren't going to line up on the threads. So it's going to be very tricky to get a nice square cut. If a little, if we even look, and poor quality versus good quality, honestly, isn't necessarily the answer. Has been my experience, but we have some square rulers somewhere. Why am I not? Here we go. This and this. So we'll take a look here. So what I'm doing is I'm lining the edge of my ruler to the edge of the fabric marks, the painted marks. This is really nice. It is working quite well. That one, not so much. Let's get it there. So this one, by the time you get almost halfway across, we've got a 1/16 of an inch variance. And so by the time we get all the way across, it might be even a 1/4 inch. So that's not going to be the just a straight, easy peasy cut and go. If I were using this, what I would do is take my square so that, and when you have a square ruler, you have corners that are combined. So this one crisscrosses up here, and you have the 10 mark, 10 here, 10 here. Down here, the opposite corner diagonally is the same kind of thing. It can, you know, so using those two corners are the ones you always want to make sure you're setting in to that corner you're cutting. If I use the others, this diagonal is off. It doesn't go to the corner. And you have a 1 full inch on one side and the 1/2 inch on this side. So it just doesn't line up right. So you want to make sure you get your true squared corner. Either is okay. You have a 1/2 inch end here and a full inch end here, and either one is okay, but you just want to make sure you get those. So I'm lining up my full inch on the painted lines, the printed lines of the design. And actually, as I lift my body, it's really important to make sure you're getting a straight down look. It's not as bad as I thought. It's actually pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the ruler out 1/4 inch, and that might be my cut. But if I do it 1/4 inch and I'm slightly off on my sewing, especially if I'm slightly narrow, then I'll have this little glimpse of black that will come through every once in a while. So I think it's better to cut if you have to gauge this by how much of the next border you have. So on this one, I have this bronze color and it's 1/4 inch. So if I go out, I'm going to say either an 1/8 inch, so that brings my sewing allowance into the bronze, an 1/8 of an inch, or right between 1/8 and 1/4. So then I'm going to be able to take my 1/4 inch seam allowance and always sew in the bronze, so that's my final edge. Or I go out beyond it. If I have enough room in the print of the design to go a 1/2 inch, I'm going to go a 1/2 inch, because then I'll sew in the black in my 1/4 inch seam. I'll have the black as the outline that shows, and it will be precise enough that that'll work. Now, if in measuring the print for squareness, it's way off, which can be, I'm going to show you some tricks, but then that's going to show even more, to have this black show. It's going to really, it'll be really wide in spots and really narrow in spots, and it'll look all wonky. So then we have to figure out other things. Okay, I'm going to use this one to demonstrate. Because if I remember right, when I tried to cut this from the pillows or whatever it was I made, it was a nightmare of squaring it up. So, okay, so let's move this. So this one's pretty square. It can be used pretty straightforwardly to the design that's printed. So that's good to know. You might pin a note on things, but then again, after things sit in your piles of fabric long enough, it might get folded and twisted and torqued, so it's not the best choice. Okay, so this one has these sweet little cattails in the corner that make this lovely design here. I'm going to say that's probably too fine to use. It's probably something that you'll just have to say, okay, we're foregoing that. So I'm going to cut right in the middle of this weird dot dash SOS. And a cutter. Oh, I have one. I have one right here. I remembered I didn't forget. Okay. Now I like this style of cut. So I'm just gonna haphazardly cut right here, because I know I'm gonna make it smaller. I'm going to lay my square down, and I'm going to see how not square it is. This has, I'll just tell viewers here, I am right on the edge of this printed dividing line, and it is 1/4 inch off from here to here. So that's not real square. So I don't know if any of you have sewn for a long time. There was a day where when we got the fabric off the bolt, we would instantly pull on the diagonal because it was to square it up, because as it was wrapped on the bolt, it got off square. And that was just standard. We also used to pre-wash our fabrics and do all that. I don't anymore. Some people still do. And so you can do that. So right here, if I look and think about this a little bit, it's kind of tricky because I don't have, yeah. Okay. So down here is longer, and up here probably comes in the other way. So if I pull on these two corners hard, so I take this bias, and if it's a bigger panel, you can do that. Now this one has a lot of blank background, so it's not as necessary because I can square it up and sacrifice bits of that outside edge and get it straight. And I want to make sure I'm using the right corner. Here's that, here's that. Yeah, that worked quite nicely actually, right there. So just pulling that diagonal, and if you do the wrong one and you set your square down and it's even worse than it was, it's like, okay, I did the wrong one. Just go back and tug the other way and maybe tug twice the other way. If you have a bigger panel that needs that kind of squaring up, you may find that you can hold on to the center and just pull the corner that is too short. So you're stretching it out. And so that's a possibility. Now I'm going to check the others and see how we look here. That's pretty good. And that's not so, well, it's not bad. It's not bad. So we're pretty good. We're pretty square. So now with something like this, I'm going to take my farthest edge. It's kind of like fussy cutting, and put it to my farthest edge of the printed design. And then I'm going to take my farthest print of the design, and put those together. So I know right here that my design, the printed design, doesn't go past here and doesn't go past here. So those are my two lines that I can work with. And I can set my square down, line it up on the folds, and go a 1/4 inch beyond the print. Go, where's my bottom one here? Oops, can't see. There it is. 1/4 inch beyond and a 1/4 inch beyond. Kind of, sort of. Make sure I'm square here, square here. Yep, yep. Okay. And go like that. I don't think I had a good angle. Now I have the minimum bit. I thought I did that. I got yeah, I didn't get quite right. So here's this edge. That was good. That was the one I could really see. Here's this edge. It's a little wider. And then here at the top, I got kind of close, and that I got kind of close. So sometimes you can also draw with a permanent marker, because that's going to be your cut edge. It's not going to show inside your sewing. Or a pencil even can sometimes do the trick, depending on the color of the fabric. So this would get sewn, unfortunately, so that got cut off. And I personally think that shows. And it's funny, unless you need it a smaller size, I think it's important to keep the design that's printed always showing inside your seam allowances. So better to err on the excess than on the too little. And this is wonderful. I'm going, oh good, I'm using this up. So I'm going to do that again and hopefully get a better sense of things. So another way to do it, and that's the thing with panels, is there really isn't like this perfect way. Oh gosh, look at that. So if I go corner to corner on the tips of those cattails, look how narrow this end is to that end. And that's a parallel. This is the edge of my ruler is parallel to this edge of print. And so it's coming out all wonky. So we're going to try and pull a little bit before we cut. So I need that side to go up. And we'll see how that does. It's amazing how well this works. Yeah, that's like a lot better. It's not great, but it's a lot better. So if I want to cut, so right now, oops, I'm going to have to think about this. I'm going to go a 1/2 inch out from here. A 1/2 inch out from the printed design so that I have plenty to sew with. And I'm going to come up here, keeping it square so it's right along my cut edge. I'm going to come, whoops, I'm not cutting in the best direction here. All those rules they tell you don't do. Don't cross your body while you're cutting. All right, and we'll just keep following that. And we're going to go a 1/2 inch out. I don't like that side. Sometimes rulers have so many marks it makes it hard to see through them. Okay, so I got a 1/2 inch here. And then I'm going to come a 1/2 inch below the print and make my square. Yep, I'm square. So when I say I'm square, what I'm doing is I'm looking that the line of my ruler is on my cut edge, and the lines I'm looking through my ruler are lining up with a cut edge. So I have a 1/4 inch there. So that means these two sides are parallel and they're perpendicular to this. Now we'll come across. This is the last one, and it's the one that's going to screw up if it's going to. I think we're pretty darn good. Okay, so this, much better. So this now is cutting off the excess, the white excess, and giving me maximum, minimum size for the full design. So I can sew a 1/4 inch seam around this, and then that can allow the full design to show, because I have a 1/2 inch from top, a 1/2 inch from bottom, and a 1/2 inch from both sides. Now if I'm going to make a quilt and I want to cut several of these, then all of them are going to be easiest to use if I have them the same size. So it's possible that the designs, by giving myself that 1/2 inch, it's possible that the designs might be a little varied from this one, but they'll fit. It gives me enough leeway. If I end up with one I have to cut off, then I have to make some choices. So anyway, so this, interestingly enough, is 13 inches wide, and my height is a little weird. So that I might want to think about, because this will be 12 and a half, and 12 and a half is going to be a hard size to mix with stars or even a checkerboard or an Irish chain or something like that. So then that puts me in a whole nother decision. So here is the rub about panels. So how do I incorporate this, get the size, get the everything working right? So I can't say there is an answer. It's just a lot of possibilities for how you go about weeding out the things that are going to be a problem. So if we keep working on this, what I might find out, and I might have done earlier, is I might have looked at this and gone, okay, this design is 12 inches across, and it is edge of design to edge of design, 9 1/4. And that's going to be a tricky one to go with. So then I have to, again, figure out, okay, well, do I go up higher, go down, go over here, go in here, come in more, cut some things off? How do we want to do that? If you can make it bigger with the background that's allowed on the print, on the printed fabric, that's going to be better for design quality. If you have to cut into the printed design, that's going to look like you cut into the printed design. So you're sacrificing the artist's efforts to begin with. Okay, so now so that's the basics of all this. You want to make sure you can square it up. And if you can't easily do that, how much do you have to sacrifice? Let's see here. You have to figure out if you're incorporating this panel into something that will have pieced blocks or fabrics, and then how does the design size fit with the blocks that you want to make. So remember, when we do a block, for instance, a star block, like this, you have this half of the flying geese is usually the same size as that. These are teeny for some reason. So typically the easiest way to make this block is when this square is the same height as that half square triangle. So you often have 1, 2, 3, 4. So any kind of measurement divided by 4 can give you this star block to incorporate with your printed design. Flying geese is a great addition because you're just doing a half. So you can make this anything you want, and then this is usually half that size. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to put flying geese in with. There, again, on Pinterest, the panel I'm going to show you here, that one, easy peasy. And I've had this forever. I inherited it from somebody. And I have a friend who's a Snoopy nut, and I have held on to it thinking, I have to find a good reason to make her something out of this. It's just really cute. But I haven't gotten around to it. So now I have. So there's a baby in their lives. So this will be a child and an older sibling. So this will be a child's quilt. And on Pinterest, these half square triangle corners were added to 2 strips here. So the same size as the half square triangles was the size of 1 strip and 2 strips. But the panel they used didn't already have a frame, so it was a really good thing to use. Then they used a wider border that went all the way around. I decided that to do 2 strips here was too busy with what was going on. And I really like this the zigzag, gosh, rick-rack. Yes, I was going, it's another word that's like zigzag. It's rick-rack. The rick-rack effect, those of us who've done older sewing. And I just didn't want too much to compete with that. So I thought these little half square triangles just sort of picked that up a little bit. And so much of it had this nice light blue. This light piece here has really true primary colors. And that light blue got missed in that one. It has the nice royal blue. So this black that's in here has a splotch of a real light blue. So that was fun. I think that works. And so I have the other one. So all I did when you do borders, all I did was, one, I squared up the piece. I pulled and tugged on it to get it right and got it pretty square. And then I cut 1/8 inch outside of the line that marked this outside border. So that meant my sewing was going to come well inside the color, but 1/8 of an inch, actually probably even less than that, ended up, if you look here, you can see, so there's an outside green line here that was actually a printed line, but only on one side was it green and it was something else somewhere else. And so it's kind of tricky. I'll open the seam up here. You can see, if I open that seam, there's just a little sliver of red that is sewn in. Well, if the print is a little wonky somewhere or a little pulled on one end from the other, that's not going to make a difference here. Your eye won't see that, not with a nice wide strip like that. If it were a super skinny strip and it went right along the edges of the rick-rack, it would, but it didn't. So that's what I did. Now, when you put borders on where you have a cornerstone in your border, so you have a corner piece, you're cutting your borders exactly the edge length of your panel. You're cutting your top border exactly the width of your panel. And then your borders are as wide as the piece here. So these are 2-inch finished half square triangles. So that means 2 plus 2 is 4, but you have the 1/2 inch we have to add for this seam allowance and that seam allowance, or in this case, binding. And so this is cut 4.5 inches, and then it will fit right into this. So what I did was I put the 2 longest pieces on separately as just those. Then I sewed my 2 short ends with the triangles. Okay, and the half square triangles are made just like we've done before, with a square for a 2.5 inch unfinished or 2-inch finished. It's 2 7/8, and you shouldn't have to trim. Some people would like to cut to the full 3-inch and then trim. I hate trimming, hate it. So I don't do trimming. So then I want to show you, there are a couple tricks to this. It's not a big deal, but you do have to pay attention to putting your squares on mirror image. So if you put this one on this way, it wouldn't be the same. See how this is up at the top? This is down at the bottom. So you have to put them on mirror image. So you want to really double, triple check as you're sewing them on and go, yep, yep, yep. And that when you sew this piece on, that you are mirror imaging this. So if I sewed this on this way, it would be wrong. So what I used as my mental image was the black points into the panel. So the black doesn't point into the panel here. It does point into the panel there. So that's the right way it goes on. When I put borders on, 2 pins. I usually pin, write that down.
Yeah.
Yeah, get a recording. So I do pin, only a few though. And the only reason is that borders are really important to the squaring of your quilt. If you sew them on willy-nilly and you have if you just have a little piece, no, it's not that big a deal. I don't even pin and measure much. But these 2 pieces were pre-cut the same size and the size of the panel. These 2 pieces were pre-cut and the same size and the size of the panel width. So now there might be a slight variation from one side to the other end of the panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find middle, like carefully, and it's right there. And I don't ever have pins in my stuff, so well, I can use this. I've actually used these a couple of times. I kind of like them, these little clippies. So I'm gonna